YouTube लाईव्ह सुरू झालाय, आपण लेक्चर सुरू करू शकतो.
नमस्कार.
आवाज नाही येत आहे सर, पण काय करूया?
नाही येते माझा आवाज?
अगदी स्पष्ट आवाज येतोय सर, अगदी सगळ्यांचा. मॅम कडे
येतोय
काहीतरी
सर
अडचण
तुमचा?
असावी.
सुप्रिया मॅडम, तुम्हाला ऐकू येतंय का?
येत आहे.
ओके,
हां
कंटिन्यू.
हां ठीक आहे.
Good evening everyone. I welcome you all in this webinar, wetland webinar. Over to Supriya madam and Vadekar sir.
थँक्यू मॅडम. सर्वांना नमस्कार. इंटॅक्ट पुणे, महाराष्ट्र वृक्ष संवर्धिनी आणि वनराई यांच्या वतीने आजचे सन्माननीय व्याख्याते डॉक्टर एरिच भरुचा सर यांच्यासह सर्व उपस्थित मान्यवर श्रोते, वेगवेगळ्या संस्था संघटनांचे प्रतिनिधी यांचं सर्वांचं मी आयोजक संस्थांच्या वतीनं स्वागत करतो. आणि आजचा जो आपला व्याख्यानमालेचा जो विषय आहे, तर त्या दृष्टीनं मी आपल्याला सांगू इच्छितो की हा जो जलसप्ताह जगभर साजरा केला जातो, म्हणजे 1991 पासून दरवर्षी स्टॉकहोम इंटरनॅशनल वॉटर इन्स्टिट्यूटच्या पुढाकारातून, तर त्याचं उद्दिष्ट असं असतं की जगभरातले पाण्याच्या संदर्भातल्या विषयांवर चर्चा घडवून आणणं, वेगवेगळ्या समस्या, उपाययोजना याच्याविषयी चर्चा करणं, आणि याच अनुषंगानं आणि याच औचित्यानं आपण सुद्धा स्थानिक पातळीवर जलसप्ताह साजरा करून कशा प्रकारे पाण्याविषयी जनजागृती करू शकतो, या विचारातून ही व्याख्यानमाला सुरू करण्यात आलेली आहे. इंटॅक्ट पुणे, महाराष्ट्र वृक्ष संवर्धिनी आणि वनराई यांच्या वतीने ही व्याख्यानमाला दरवर्षी आयोजित केली जाते. तर या आयोजक संस्थांविषयी मी आपल्याला थोडक्यात सांगू इच्छितो. इंडियन नॅशनल ट्रस्ट फॉर आर्ट अँड कल्चरल हेरिटेज अर्थात इंटॅक्टची स्थापना 1984 मध्ये नवी दिल्ली येथे भारतात वारसा जागरूकता आणि संवर्धनाचे नेतृत्व करण्याच्या उद्देशानं करण्यात आली होती. आज इंटॅक्ट ही जगातील सर्वात मोठ्या वारसा संस्थांपैकी एक म्हणून ओळखली जाते, ज्याचे देशभरात 228हून अधिक विभाग आहेत. या संस्थेच्या माध्यमातून विविध प्रकारच्या वारशाचे जतन व संवर्धन करण्याचं कार्य चालतं, ज्यामध्ये नैसर्गिक वारसा हा एक महत्वाचा भाग आहे. आणि म्हणूनच इंटॅक्ट पुणे चॅप्टर या व्याख्यानमालेची आयोजक संस्था आहे. इंटॅक्टच्या पुणे शाखेची स्थापना 1986 मध्ये झाली आणि त्यांनी पुण्याच्या वारशाच्या संरक्षणासाठी महत्वपूर्ण प्रकल्प राबवले आहेत. त्यापैकी महत्वाचे म्हणजे पुण्याची वारसा यादी आणि दस्तऐवजीकरण, शनिवार वाडा परिसराचे पुनरुज्जीवन, पवित्र वृक्षांचे दस्तऐवजीकरण आणि संवर्धन, तसंच पुण्याच्या नद्यांना अतिक्रमण आणि प्रदूषणापासून वाचवण्याचे प्रयत्न, असे वेगवेगळे उपक्रम इंटॅक्ट पुणेच्या माध्यमातून राबवले जातात. त्याचबरोबर महाराष्ट्र वृक्ष संवर्धिनी ही संस्था नैसर्गिक संसाधनाच्या साक्षरतेवर लक्ष केंद्रित करून पर्यावरणाच्या पुनर्संचयनासाठी गेल्या 33 वर्षाहून अधिक काळापासून कार्यरत आहे. या संस्थेचे संस्थापक प्रख्यात वनस्पती शास्त्रज्ञ डॉक्टर वामन दत्तात्रय वर्तक सर आणि इतर संस्थापक सदस्यांच्या कार्याचा समृद्ध वारसा MVS ला लाभलेला आहे. महाराष्ट्र वृक्ष संवर्धिनी ही संस्था क्षमता वृद्धी, जनजागृती, ज्ञानाचा प्रचार प्रसार आणि कौशल्य विकासासाठी विविध कार्यक्रम आयोजित करत असते. आणि याच भूमिकेतून महाराष्ट्र वृक्ष संवर्धिनीने या व्याख्यानमालेच्या सह आयोजनाची जबाबदारी घेतलेली आहे. वनराई ही संस्था पद्मविभूषण डॉक्टर मोहन धारिया यांनी स्थापन केलेली आहे. गेल्या 4 दशकांपासून पर्यावरण संवर्धन आणि शाश्वत ग्रामीण विकासाच्या क्षेत्रात देश पातळीवर वनराई कार्यरत आहे. प्रामुख्याने वनीकरण, मृदा जल संवर्धन, परिसंस्था पुनरुज्जीवन, शाश्वत शेती, ग्रामीण उपजीविका, महिला सक्षमीकरण अशा विविध क्षेत्रांमध्ये वनराई कार्यरत आहे. आणि वनराईच्या माध्यमातून तळागाळात लोकसहभागातून नैसर्गिक संसाधनांच्या व्यवस्थापनासाठी प्रत्यक्ष प्रकल्प राबवण्याबरोबरच जनजागृती सुद्धा केली जाते. आणि या अनुषंगाने वेगवेगळे चर्चासत्र, व्याख्यानं, मासिक अंक प्रकाशित करणं हा सुद्धा वनराईच्या कार्याचा एक मुख्य भाग आहे. आणि याच अनुषंगाने या व्याख्यानमालेच्या आयोजनामध्ये वनराई संस्था आज सहभागी आहे. यंदाचं आपलं हे व्याख्यानमालेचं 4थं वर्ष असून गेल्या वर्षी आपण नदी संवर्धन या विषयावर व्याख्यानमाला आयोजित केली होती. आणि यंदा आपण वेटलँड कन्झर्वेशन अर्थात पाणथळ जागांचं संवर्धन या विषयावर ही व्याख्यानमाला आयोजित केली. आपण गेल्या 2 दिवसांमध्ये डॉक्टर हेमंत आपटे सरांचं व्याख्यान ऐकलेलं आहे. कालच आपण हेमंत कारखानी सरांचं मॅनग्रोव्हवरचं व्याख्यान ऐकलेलं आहे. आणि आज अतिशय महत्वाचा विषय डॉक्टर एरिच भरुचा सरांचा, की जे रिस्टोरेशन वरची खूप अतिशय चांगली अभ्यासपूर्ण मांडणी जे आपल्याला नेहमी एक मार्गदर्शन देते सरांची प्रत्येक विषयावरची. तर आज सुद्धा आपल्याला वेटलँड रिस्टोरेशनच्या दृष्टीनं सरांची मांडणी आपण ऐकणार आहोत. तर सरांचा परिचय करण्यासाठी आणि पुढील प्रश्न उत्तर आणि इतर कार्यक्रम पुढे घेऊन जाण्याच्या दृष्टीने मी सुप्रिया मॅडम कडे पुढची सूत्र सोपवतो.
Thank you, Vadekar sir. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Erach Bharucha today here in this webinar. A surgeon by profession, his career in wildlife conservation started as a young boy traveling with none other than Dr. Salim Ali. Dr. Bharucha heads the Bharatiya Vidyapeeth Institute of Environmental Education and Research, BVIR. As the director of BVIR, Dr. Bharucha has trained thousands of students who are now themselves contributing in the field of environment conservation. A well-known wildlife photographer, he has traveled and studied Indian national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, and many other ecosystems in India extensively over the last 3 decades. He has authored several books on conservation and biodiversity, including Wonders of the Indian Wilderness, a 3-volume set, Changing Landscapes, the Cultural Ecology of India, Living Bridges, Folk Cultures of India, Then and Now, an academic textbook on environmental education, among many others. He has variously served on multiple committees and organizations, including the National Tiger Conservation Authority, the Central Zoo Authority, WWF India, Salim Ali Center for Ornithology and Natural History, Wildlife Trust of India, Maharashtra State Biodiversity Board, the Board of Wetland, Government of Maharashtra, and many more. In the process, he has contributed greatly to conservation research projects on diverse species, including black buck, wolves, the critically endangered great Indian bustard, and also the flamingos, which we have been discussing over the last 2 days. He has worked extensively on wetlands, including his work on inland wetlands of India with SACON. He has specialized in a range of areas, including environment education, biodiversity management, land use planning, forestry, and zoo planning and management. He has received several awards, including the Sanctuary Lifetime Service Award. Over to you, Dr. Bharucha. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you, Supriya, for that long introduction, which I had suggested make it please very short. But I must thank the organizers for this, the multiple organizers for this very, very important evening session. Because, not because wetlands is close to my heart, but because it's become such a critical issue now that all our wetlands will need some level of management in the near future. And this is something which we'll have to look at from all the 3 basic challenges which humans have to look at. The first being biodiversity conservation itself. The other looking at climate change, which is linked to wetlands very often. And also the pollution aspects of what happens, and what wetlands can do for us for pollution as well. So these 3 great challenges that we have are all in one way or another linked with how we restore our wetlands. And I think this is something so very important. My own experience has been fairly wide in looking at wetlands, but what I'll talk about today was the effort that we made with the Pune Municipal Corporation to restore Pashan Lake, which had become extremely polluted. It was holding very little water, and there were, what I had seen as a young boy with Dr. Salim Ali in that lake had completely disappeared. What were we to do with that? And the municipal corporation, at that time, Praveen Pardeshi was here in Pune, and said, well, why don't you do something about this? And I wrote him a two-page note with very specific things which we'll have to do. And they found the funds from the JNN-URM project. And the JNN-URM project led to according to what JNNURM said, was one of the leading restoration activities that they did during that period of time. So, if we look at restoration, what do we need to do? And that means we have to look at both the abiotic and the biotic parameters. And the process, therefore, requires a certain protocol. And that protocol goes from pre-monitoring, understanding what is the status of that wetland, planning a series of activities over a period of time, and making that happen with coordination with very different stakeholders, including, very importantly, the local stakeholders that we have. If we don't do this step, then the whole thing eventually falls through. At the implementation stage, we have to remember that wetland restoration needs a long-term activity that will keep it going. So if you have a 2-year project for a wetland restoration, don't think that after that everything will just work very well. You need to have a continuous follow-up over several years to see that what you have restored does not reverse back to what it was. So this post-activity monitoring and evaluation needs planning the economic inputs into that in a very precise way, where you know that the first couple of years may go in pre-planning, using that planning activity data and making that available to the different stakeholders who are there for you to along with us in this kind of activity. And finally, if the project is over, you still need to monitor it, and you still need to go back and see if some things have changed next. So, what do you need in terms of the strategy? We need to look at the water quality, we need to look at water depth, we need to look at various niche separations in that particular wetland. Do you have, how much open water is there? How much underwater plants are there? Is there a ring of emergent vegetation on the edges? Is there floating vegetation? Is that a good sign or a bad sign? So if you get hyacinth coming up as floating vegetation covers the whole lake, then you have a very serious problem because it's going to come back. If you can recreate mud banks, it's very important if your aim is to bring back waders. And if you cannot do this, then you will find that you get a different type of community of water birds coming there. And finally, you need to look at the fringe. You need to look at what that wetland is placed in, what is there in the surround. And this is a very critical thing, because if you don't look at that, then whatever you do for the water aquatic part of it often does not work. Now, before I go ahead with this, let me tell you that one, perhaps the most crucial question is, what do you want to do that wetland restoration for? And this is often missed. So if you are going to look at the water body and say, this water body is drying up every year and I need to enhance its water holding capacity, it's a very different kettle of fish. If you say that I want a natural ecosystem, which is, well, as close to a natural wetland as possible, then you need a completely different strategy. If you want avifauna to come back, or if you want fish to come back, then again you need to tweak that model that you have created for that specific task. And so this is a bit of visualization. How do you visualize what you want 5 years from now, 10 years from now, in the longer term? And say, this is what I eventually want to achieve. And that perception of that sometimes needs to change. It may not be cast in stone, but the fact remains that you need this kind of a thing to work through that implementation phase next. So, what are your overall management strategies? The first thing that I feel is you need to minimize disturbance. And very often, like Prashant, which I'm going to talk about later, minimizing the disturbance just never happened, right? So that was out of our control in what we wanted to do. And I think we need to understand that every time that you do a wetland restoration, it's not going to come up to do exactly what you planned to do or what you wanted. The next is, are you going to look at species-related actions? Do I want some specific species to survive there? Do I look at the well-being of those species? For example, if I want flamingos, I need something very different in the Thana area and in the creek there. What are the systems-related actions that I have to do? So if you look at this as an ecosystem, then what systemic changes need to be made to bring back something which is as close as possible to nature? I don't think you can ever succeed in making a completely natural ecosystem in a wetland where you get the structure right, you get the composition of your aquatic species right, and you get the functions that wetlands perform. This takes probably decades or even perhaps hundreds of years to get to that level. So you need to get as close as possible to a natural wetland. And finally, unless you get public and private participation in this, this will never work. So how do you do that? And the answer to that is SEPA, communication, education, public awareness. If you can do that, that's Aichi target 1, and that brings about a very high rate of success if you can bring this about. Next. Now I'm going to take you back in history many years when I was, well, just in school, and these pictures of mine are taken just when I was doing my SSC. So instead of studying at home, I was looking at Pashan as a wetland. And what I want to point out here is look at the background. That was Pashan village. And I'm going to show you pictures today of exactly the same hills with what has happened today. So there are a whole lot of things which were happening there, but you can see there is no hypomia, there is no hyacinth, there are lots of local ducks because probably I took this picture. I don't even remember which season it was, but probably summer. And so there was a lot of bird life coming there. Incidentally, on one trip with Salim Ali, we found one flamingo. And I don't think people have ever seen flamingo in the Pashan Lake ever before. What on earth was it doing there? Next. So if we look at this sort of activity that we sort of have to plan, we had to look at where we will want to do things for the periphery. Like in those days, you had a whole lot of blue rock thrushes, several raptors. We used to get cotton teal and nakta ducks in a fairly large number. And this again was something which had gone away when we tried to do this exercise. Next. Right, I'm going to show you some very old images that we had, and just to show you what sort of urbanization occurred during that period of time. And this is where we were, with nothing around Pashan which you could say is really urban. There was Pashan village, and there were these small little centers which were coming out as urban areas. There was no pollution of the water, but the lake had by that time started getting mildly silted up. Next. So this is 10 years down the line, and you can see what's happening. This Rabnagar colony is growing, and the whole thing is now getting gradually semi-urbanized or urbanized. Next. And this is what happened again in a few years' time. And today, if you look at this, this is an old satellite-based image. Today, if you look at this, all this will be red and there's no yellow or blue left. Next. So what did we actually start doing? In 2014, a little before that actually, 2012, we started looking at what do we want to do there. And for those 2 years, we had a lot of data collection on birds. We had a lot of looking at chemical pollution. We looked at how the lake looked in summer or in winter. And also, we tried to understand what was the inflow from the colony which had by and large developed there. So our vision was that we want to bring back as much as possible of the natural ecosystem. We wanted at least a large percentage of it to be urban water, because also the corporation wanted to use the water system there. And from our side, we wanted birds to come back, which had completely disappeared. And we wanted to do a little bit of afforestation on the edge and keeping the lake away from the bypass which had just then been developed. Next. So this is what we started doing. When I suggested that if you want the lake to hold more water, you will have to dredge it, there was virtually an uproar against me, and they said, oh, what if it doesn't rain next year? And what if it percolates away and doesn't hold the water? What we find here was very fascinating. This is at the inlet of the Ram Nadi. Well, it had become a very small channel by then, where this dredging, we started doing this dredging activity, leaving whatever of those bubble trees were possible and removing the Ipomia. This was the basic first startup of this activity. And this was around 2007, and you can see that a little bit of urbanization has already begun behind there. Next. We had to clear the Ipomia belt, and when I used to go there every second Sunday and see how much dredging was done. And one of the interesting things that came about from my visits there was that the top layer of the silt which had gathered was recent silt which had come from urbanization of the Ramnala belt. And this was very different from the deeper layer of the silt. Now, I realized that if one sort of dredged much more, then you would hit bedrock, and that was Burami soil, which may not hold water. So I would go and tell the bulldozer guy that now you can't dredge anymore here, you move away and go to somewhere else. Around this time, Mr. Praveen Pardeshi phoned me one day and said, Doc, what am I supposed to do with all this tons of silt that you are removing? And I said, you are the commissioner of Pune, you decide where you want to dump it. So we said, no, but please give me a solution. So I said, look, you can use that to do a little afforestation if you use that silt. But the other thing you can do is to build a couple of islands within the lake, which will allow birds to come and roost over there, perhaps also nest over there. And at that time, I thought that will this work or not? But we felt, let's try this out. And this was really a trial and error thing, and it took a lot of risk to do that. So we made these islands in the middle of the lake and dredged away the rest around it. This, I think, was a very, very positive step, and anybody who's looking at a large enough water body who can spare a bit of that water body for an island, I think it makes a lot of sense. Next. So here you can see what has happened. Those are those islands developing, and you can see the increasing urbanization that you get around there. So this is October 2007, and the islands, eventually we flattened them up a bit and made it sort of trying to recreate mud banks. I must say that never worked. And mud bank creation is probably the most difficult thing to do, and make it work as a mud bank, because it will probably, every monsoon, it will go back into the water, and that's something that you don't want. So this was the state where we were also raising the periphery of the lake and using that for afforestation. So that's when this whole thing that you see today has developed. Next. So this is again, once you got this, you found very rapidly it became a terrestrial system for a while. And it was quite worrying that if it doesn't rain, what happens? But we had 2 seasons of sort of dry and wet and whatever, and we were able to monitor this, and that was a very interesting exercise. Next. So here you see this hypomia in 2009. We would remove it and it would come back, and then finally we had to use bulldozers to get rid of this hypomia. Next. So finally, this is what it started looking like in 2010. So it took us 3 years to stage by stage do what we wanted. And you can see here the islands with the bubble trees on it, and the open water which was now stabilized. And again, look at the urbanization, please. I mean, this is what you can see stage by stage every year as the urbanization increased. Next. So this is the one side, and we started getting a resurgence of pistia first, and sometimes a bit of hyacinth, but this has progressively increased over the years. Now, one of the things that we really could not do, though it was recommended in what I had written for them as a project, was how do you prevent polluted water from coming back into Bashan Lake? Because if that is going to happen, then your water quality is going to go down, and that's not something that was that had to be managed. So by 2011, we were concerned that part of the pistia and hyacinth starting to come back was the result of continuous pollution, chemical pollution, coming into the water at that stage. Next. So here you see 2011 covered by hyacinth and, pistia, but the recurrence of hyacinth had about started coming. Now this was very interesting because you had patches of pistia and patches of hyacinth, and the open water completely disappeared at times, and this was something which was very concerning. There were attempts to physically remove this. I'm afraid it wasn't very successful, and the reason why it was not successful was there was no substantial finance for doing this. It was not there in the initial project because the project was supposed to end, and the project did not have a follow-up funding from corporation, which I'm afraid they had promised. So this is something that we have to always remember when we do this. How are you going to maintain the restoration that you have done? Next. So here you can see pistia being used by the buffalo, which I thought was a good idea, though lots of people said, no, get rid of the buffalo. I thought the buffaloes were at least removing part of the pistia, which the bulldozer and the peripheral boat fellow who was coming there, boating every day and trying to pick up pistia from there. So this is one of the issues that we had with the local buffalo owners. Next. So this is what you see in the early 2007. So now we are going back to what it was in 2007. And you can see there is a lot of hypomia beds. There is a little bit of activity going on for planting trees. But you can see the nala course now coming in because it was dredged along the edges of it. Now this is very interesting because we finally realized that if we want mud banks to recur, that is the area where you could create mud banks again. So we built 3 small, well, one would call it buns or anicuts, so, to hold the water back there and allow the silt to gather there only. I'm afraid it didn't work too well, right? It did work in the first few years. You started to see a very shallow wetland developing with a lot of grasses and with a lot of the bubbles still surviving. And this was a good phase, I'm afraid, which didn't last too long. So next. So this was the mud banks that we tried to recreate. And I must say, as you see here, it has worked, right? But the point is the mud banks should have remained with mud rather than getting vegetated like this. So there was no way of controlling this mud bank into what we actually desired. And this became part of the island system as well. So you had the islands and you had this kind of a low thing which we thought will become mud banks, but eventually became grassy things. But it was really good for the bird life, and a lot of waterfowl started coming back. Interestingly, waterfowl started coming back very early. The river terns started coming back very early. So obviously there was a lot of fish there for the river terns, and there was enough food material for ducks, but you can look at this picture, there are no waders. So the wading birds never really made a comeback. Next. Oh, but there were some interesting insights, right? There was this tower on which the white-necked storks were having a nest, and they had chicks as well. Next. And this is what, again now, so you can realize how rapidly urbanization occurred by 2013. I must say, most bird species do tend to adapt to this kind of thing. And you've seen it in many, many urban wetlands, where a lot of birds start coming back, getting used to it, as long as they're not overly disturbed, as long as you don't do boating inside. So there were huge requests coming in 2013-14. We want to do boating in the lake. And I said, well, then you'll reverse what we have tried to do. So I think taking that decision of no boating was a good thing that the corporation did. Next. Well, at one stage, we got a huge population of 5,000 little cormorants. Now, the answer was very simple. Why did they suddenly appear? By the way, cormorants were uncommon even at the time in the 1970s and 80s. So the cormorants increased rapidly when the fisheries department, without informing anybody, released tilapia in the lake. So you can see how one exotic species being brought in can change the dynamics of the whole place. So now you have these fairly aggressive cormorants, and here you can see what they are doing. They form this big group, and they move gradually to the edge, taking the fish with them to the edge of the shallows, and then all of them dive together, and when they move back with fish in their gullets, then the next group of cormorants come in. And it was really beautiful to watch this. You could spend quite a lot of time watching this incredible coordinated activity. And interestingly, there's no leader in that group. So how does it work? And that's a very fascinating thing. Who leads this group towards the shore? Does it happen in some sort of something in the body language of one cormorant and another which begin to understand what each other wants? So this is the thing that we saw in 2013 when the tilapia began to come back. Next. We also got, of course, spoonbills, open-billed storks, painted storks coming back. And what was wonderful for us to watch was in those bamboo trees which I had tried to leave behind, we started getting nesting of painted storks, spoonbills, open-billed storks, all making a comeback, which frankly was not there in the 1970s and 80s when I used to go there. This was not a bird for these kind of birds. They were never there. So something changed where the population of birds and the dynamics between them altered with the eco-restoration. Next. Wow, we got lots of herons, and gray herons began to nest. We had purple herons. So these were and of course the usual egrets. So this is something that really came about in a gradual change of. You could see the changes. We've got lots of data on year by year the changes that occurred following that. Every year I had one or two of my MSc students going and monitoring the bird life of Pashan Lake, also doing pollution studies. And well, it's been a fun project of many, many years. Next. So here you have a cormorant, and next. And we had, very nice, spotbills nesting. They had eggs, they had chicks. Coots had chicks, and so you've got sort of breeding birds making a comeback. Next. Oh, they're the eggs of the spotbills. Yeah, next. Well, this was a stage thing. One year suddenly we began to see night herons. Now, night herons again were not ever coming there, but the night herons focused on those planted trees which were on the islands, and they developed a colony there. And I think that colony, I've got data on this, but I can't exactly remember. I think the colony lasted 4 years, and after that they suddenly abandoned the colony. Now, I've seen this in Pune. Boat Club Road in Pune had a colony of these night herons. They came for 5 or 6 years, and in the 6th year they decided to move out. So even if you have kept the system, the ecosystem in the way it is, the disturbance level the way it was, night herons are sort of capricious birds. And this kind of colony nesting tends to change, and we really don't know why. It would be very interesting to look at what factors could lead to this kind of sudden appearance and disappearance of a whole colony of one particular species. Next. Well, that's the old bubble trees which we had left behind in the water. And you can see the cormorants there, and then there are other pictures that I have of painted stalks in large numbers nesting there. Next. So here you have painted stalks in 2013 at their nest. There were lots of chicks, and it was a very interesting time because you could watch them fishing and bringing fish not just from the Pashan Lake itself, but from somewhere outside. I suspect that they were going to the Telco Lake and coming back from there, because Telco Lake had released a lot of fish around that period of time. So it's not that they were just exploiting Pashan, they were using other lakes to bring back fish for the chicks. Next. That's the phenomenon I told you, which fascinated me a lot. So you can see the cormorants there and the others waiting for this group to finish catching fish so that they could come in, and these fellows would go and sit on the so-called mud bag that we found. So the diving also happens so spontaneously together. All of them are into the water. And then they all slowly emerge again, and that's how this activity happens. Next. There you have got painted stalks and cormorants nesting together. This was, I think, 2013, 14, 15, 3 years or 4 years. Next. And of course, you got butterflies, and you got insect life coming back, and you got dragonflies coming back. So things that were just gone away were brought back. Now, how at that period of time, I was wondering, is this going to last? And I had no answer for that. But I knew that the small minor changes that I was seeing was already seeing that the population that had gone up had begun to plateau. And I felt maybe we need to do something about this. And I tried to convince the corporation that we relook at that, we relook at the pollution levels, we try to divert away some of the sewage that had begun to increase. And unfortunately, I couldn't convince anybody to help us with that. Next. So finally, this is the story of Pashan. And I think it's a good model to have emulated, because we did get gains. The fact that many of these projects have got a defined lifespan needs to be relooked at very, very seriously, because then if you don't do that, eventually you have achieved something which you lose, and that's even worse than not doing anything. So I think this was the story that we put together over the years. Having any wetland is a huge asset for an urban area. It's not just for bird watchers. Downstream from Pashan, the dhobis used to use it. I don't know whether they use it today. As I showed you, the buffalo owners were thrilled that their buffaloes could have a bath there and whatever. So we need to look at those alternative activities also that a wetland actually produces. It's a very diverse wetland. Every wetland has a characteristic of its own. And that is why that study that you do before you set up an eco-restoration project is so very, very vital. If you miss some of those points, then you get an effect that you may not want. But as I said, this was something that W.A. Rogers, Alan Rogers of Wildlife Institute of India actually taught me. He said, Doc, what is it that you want? Wherever we talked about forest restoration or the steps for different types of restoration as to what do you do on site, what do you do off site, what sort of plants do you want to get back, not just in a wetland, but exactly in a forest, what do you want to do for grassland restoration. You need a clear vision of what you want to do in the long term. And each of these ecosystems, then you have to be able to tweak it by saying, at the end of 5 years or 10 years or maybe longer, what do I want? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
We have some time for question answers. So if any of the participants have any questions, you can type them in the chat box or you can raise hands via the Zoom option. Unmute yourself and ask your question.
Oh, I have so many problems that I can ask the audience about things that I don't know.
So please feel free to share your questions. We have quite a few researchers here from different backgrounds. So it could inspire something within them to take on some projects to explore those questions.
I'd always be ready to help any youngster who wants to do something here, or anywhere else for that matter. You're always most welcome.
Thank you, sir.
So currently I help the Navroji Godrej Center for Plant Research at Shirwal and at a farm place called Ajnuch, a little 10 kilometers beyond Shirwal, where we have restored a grassland, a patch of forest which was already sort of restoring itself, and a canal system which has led to ponding and ponds of wetland there. And that's over the last 5 years that I've been going there. It's been very fascinating to see how nature comes back and how birds start coming back and how we've got porcupines and we've got jackals and we've got lots of peacocks which eat up everything that we plant. So it's a fascinating place and you all are welcome there. It's nice to do this through an experiential learning about ecosystems. So any such opportunity that you get, my last comment today would be that very often we don't look very deeply at nature. We look at it and we say, that's beautiful scenery. You go to a place like Mahabaleshwar and say, oh, it's very beautiful. You go to Kas and say, it's oh, very beautiful flowers. But you don't look deeply at it. We don't try to understand how it is working. What is the ecosystem doing there 24/7? And if we do that, that's part of it as a science, but it's also important by looking at it from the angle of societal things. How is it helping local people? Are there problems with local people with your restoration project? And how do you solve those? It's also equally important to look at it in our country from a very spiritual angle. So it's not just beautiful, but it is moving and it changes the way you look at things. So look at things very carefully from very different perspectives, and that's enlightening. So Supriya, I think there are no questions.
There are, sir, they are coming in the chat box. Would you like me to read them out?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
And thank you for bringing out those other aspects of wetland restoration, the socio-cultural ones and the spiritual ones, which are so deeply ingrained in our life. Thank you for that. So we have a question from Rashmi Ghosh. Do wetlands increase the groundwater level?
Oh yes, definitely. Definitely. At varying levels, of course, and in varying ways, depends on the substrate that you have. But of course, it raises the water level, the underground water levels. It's also the fact that the percolation part of it helps you downstream in terms of doing agriculture. In some places, these wetlands can be used for doing good fisheries, not tilapia, of course, but good fisheries means different things. And that's the economic background of wetlands. So don't forget sometimes we as environmentalists, we feel that it's nothing to do with economics, but it has. Because if you don't produce the economic aspects of it, nobody is going to want it today. And more we'll have to look at any restoration thing that we do, how is it going to benefit people? Because if we don't look at that angle, people are not going to accept it where they were doing 50 years ago when I started doing these things. It's changed now. That's the human mindset. And that mindset change is a very critical thing. I know people will question me about this. I believe that you do this with school and college education. And that the whole of environmental thinking has to start at that level and get integrated into the curricula of schools and colleges. It's happening now. The NEP, National Education Policy 2020, says that. The National Framework 2023 also brings that out, that you want to do experiential learning and things that we were talking about for quite a few years now has become part of this. And I think the biggest champion of this that we have had is MC Mehta, who brought in the need for curricular changes and bringing environment into school and college curriculum.
Thank you, sir. So in a way, as you rightly said, the wetland restoration long-term success does lie in education. There's another question, sir.
Yes.
How long it takes to restore the wetlands?
Ouch. That's a painful one. It takes as long as it takes. But if you have got the planning done rightly and you've got the initial data, you have very good indications of how it works. Now, see, we are also in a monsoonal climate, right? So every wetland is going to fluctuate up and down. So you have to account for that. So your first data collection has to be at least through two rounds of different seasons, which gives you an idea of what happens when it fills up totally with monsoon water. And today, what happens when you get an extreme weather event and you get torrents of rain in a few hours, what happens to that wetland? So that is one part of it. Then suppose you get 2 or 3 years of drought, what is going to happen? It's very difficult to visualize these things. So it's very difficult to say how long it's going to take to restore it. So anybody who comes out and says, oh, I know exactly how long it will take, is actually bluffing.
So there's another question by Anita Kobragade. Nowadays, ignorance or not feeling the need to have knowledge about the conservation of our wetlands or beautiful nature is the biggest barrier in terms of sustainability. How do we, as human beings, make a small effort to change the mindsets?
You know, the first target for biodiversity conservation, as I told you earlier, is Aichi Target 1, which says it has to be done through communication, education, public awareness. And that is really the model. But you also need to look at how do you convince policymakers? How do you do something with the local politicians who are there? How do you do something with the different departments that have to be brought into, especially wetland conservation? You need to talk to irrigation department, you need to look at forest, you need to look at what is the land tenure around it, very, very critically important, very often that you miss out. So you look at these streams of governance and have to bring them together. I had this huge problem of getting these kind of people together from agriculture department, animal husbandry, fisheries, forest, when I was chairman biodiversity board in Maharashtra. And getting them to talk to each other was itself, I think it took me 2 years just to do that and bring them all on a common platform as to what we wanted to do in Maharashtra. But you know, the fallout of those several workshops we did in those 2 years started showing positive results much later. And maybe one day I can talk to you all about this as to what exactly happened and how, when you felt that, oh, we did all these workshops and people didn't respond, but actually over time you found that those trickles of information had made a difference. So, communicating this to local people, to local politicians, to the executive people who are there, I think is very critically important, and it's very, very important to bring different government bodies and different governance effectively together, not just for a workshop. It has to be made to work.
Thank you, sir. Can I move on to the next question? We have a question from Divika Mutha. She's asking about, can you comment on works of Ramveer Tanwar? So he has been very popular on social media as Pond Man. So comment on that. And there's another follow-up question. How can we be part of these wetland restoration or conservation initiatives?
Okay. So the first thing is I'm not very savvy with social media, so I would really look at that. But what was the next question you said? How can we be part of these? How can you be part? Oh, that's so simple. There's so many Pune is fantastic. There are just so many organizations doing things in many, many different ways, and all of you can get absorbed in this. And these organizations need young people to come and help in what they want to do, take on activities. I am not a great believer in padyatras and things, but I see that in today's day and age, look at the Bulabutha River issue. You had so many interested young people wanting to do something about it. And to me, that was a very rewarding process. I mean, 50 years ago, I never saw this. Even 40 years, 30 years ago, I never saw this. So we have got now a well-educated, understanding youth. And only thing is that we have not been able to harness that youth. And that gap is actually my generation. We never did anything about this. Okay? So I think this is very important. And very, very critically important now, if you are talking about getting involved in this, it is the responsibility primarily of school and college teachers. And building teacher capacity now has become a very, very important thing, and we need to do this very rapidly. Anyone else?
Thank you, sir. Yes, we have some more. Thank you for highlighting that positive aspect. We have been discussing so many negative aspects of wetlands and the threats. It's so heartening to know that, you know, you believe in the power of the youth and that we have so much talent and we have hope for the future. We have two people who have raised hands. One is Anagha Ingre and Rishikesh Talwarkar. May I request each of you to just unmute yourself and then ask your question.
Yes, Anagha.
Hello, sir. Actually, this is
but Vanarai can't
Anaga's
hear you,
husband
people.
speaking. She had to go out because
Oh,
my son
okay.
started crying.
Okay,
We had a
that's fine.
question. So we have a company where we conduct various inspections, and part of our work is we conduct inspections of soils.
Yeah, very
So
good.
analysis of soils, different content of soils for agricultural
I follow.
research and for other studies.
Mhm.
So is there any way where we can contribute towards wetland conservation? Because part of the soil analysis we do involves determination of properties and condition of the soil. Present
Yeah.
condition, how wet it is, what are the nutrients involved in it, what are the pollutants involved in it. And another work that we do is we determine water pollution. So, for example, we can compare clean water with dirty water and determine what sort of pollutants in what percentage are there in the sample of water. And for that, we don't need to collect any samples. We can straight away go to a particular site with our equipment and do the inspection there. So there's no need to dig anything up or no need to collect some water, bring it to a lab and do. So how can we as a professional organization collaborate for this? Because
This is
we will not be able to teach teachers and students to do this because it's a very highly professional activity.
I
But
understand.
our technology should reach the masses, or at least should reach the concerned policy and decision makers to so that whenever they make the new policies or amend the existing policies, they are aware of this technology, because the awareness of this is very limited. So
Yes.
how can we as a professional organization collaborate with anybody uh, in and around Pune or Maharashtra so to get this technology to where it needs to go?
That's very, very critically important. In fact, if you can do this and you start by doing this very early, before the project also takes off, it becomes very important. So you need to make these connections between the implementers and what you have to offer. But that's a positive step that you would have to take rather than people coming and asking you specifically, I need to look at this whole, let us say, soil, let us say the detritus and what is happening there, and looking at soil both peripheral and also water pollution that's coming in. It's something that we did do for Pashan for quite some time. We were able to follow this up with my students from Bharati Vidyapith. So I think it's critically important that you do this. And if you have got a unit that you can take on the side of the lake and do it, I think it's even better, because then you can do it from multiple places around the lake. And very importantly, these kind of studies have to be done throughout a whole year's cycle. If you just do one study and keep it like that, doesn't make sense. You want to see the trends that are happening. And if you look at the trends, then you know what you can correct and what the ecologists can correct and what the pollution monitoring people can actually do. So this is again something where you get multiple agencies together to make this happen. And
So would it be possible for you to share some contact details about the agencies, because we are not aware of which agencies to contact?
So Pune has all these NGOs doing this all the time. So you just look up a list of environmental NGOs on the net and you'll get half a dozen people saying, please, please come and help us. So,
because as of now, we are collaborating with BIF.
Yes, BIF is a good place to work with.
So we are
many
in collaboration with them, but I would like it if more we can collaborate with more organizations so that
Just go on the net, they are all there. It's best that you locate the right one for you and where you want to do it. We need to do this everywhere. We need to do this in the Mulabota. We need to look at lakes that are around. We also need to look at siltation, which is very difficult for us to look at. For example, in the Western Ghats, with the streams that come out of the Western Ghats, how much siltation is happening. So these are things that we really need. And if you've got high-tech material tools to do this, I think you're in a very good position to do a lot of things.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So I'll search for some of the NGOs online, and if I have any doubts, I'll get in touch with Supriya madam, because I have her email. So I'll get in touch with her
Yes,
to get
please do.
contact you if required.
Please do. Please do.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Rishikesh, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah. Namaskar, sir.
Namaskar, how are you?
I'm fine, sir. After a long time.
Yes.
Yeah. तर म्हणजे मी आता रिसेंटली ह्याला गेलो होतो पाषाण लेकला.
Oh,
तर त्याची जी वेस्ट बाजू जी आहे तिथे ते भराव घातलेला आहे. तिथे मला वाटतं 30 वर्षापूर्वी त्यांनी बरीच झाडं लावली, मग बहुतेक देशी झाडं आहेत. तर आता तिथली जी म्हणजे त्याच्या काठावरती अगदी म्हणजे इथं लेक संपतो आणि लगेच त्याच्या काठावरती प्रचंड म्हणजे वेगळ्या प्रकारचीच एक इकोसिस्टम, फॉरेस्ट इकोसिस्टम तयार झालेली आहे. आणि त्याचे पक्षी, प्राणी त्याच पद्धतीने इव्हन क्रेमॅटोगॅस्टोरॅन्टची पण नेस्ट आहेत. तर ह्याचा म्हणजे एवढी मोठी चारी बाजूनी ऑलमोस्ट झाडं मोठी मोठी झाली आहेत, त्याच्यामुळे त्या इकोसिस्टम मध्ये त्यातल्या फरक पडलेला तुम्हाला जाणवतोय का? आणि पक्ष्यांवरती स्पेशली मायग्रेटरी बर्ड्स वरती किती फरक पडलाय त्याचा, म्हणजे किती
yeah.
इम्पॅक्ट झालाय?
There are two things. There's a positive side to this and there's a negative side to this, right? Wherever they planted indigenous species, terrestrial birds have made a big comeback. You get flycatchers and you get drongos and you get green bee eaters. So the insectivores have increased in a large number. But on the other hand, the frugivores are just the same, except bulbuls, which always go everywhere. So I think one needs to look at what is the species mix that you have used for your afforestation. And using indigenous species, of course, now everybody starts talking about this. But sometimes the availability of exactly the right indigenous species is not there. You could talk to NGCPR about this. They have a very good idea of what are the most appropriate things to plant, especially on the edge of a wetland, because you need water tolerant species there, because when the monsoon comes and the water level rises, many of those species which are not water tolerant die off. So you need to look at very specific things and say, what is the restoration program of the fringe of the lake? I think that's a very critically important thing. So I'm glad you raised this point, because restoring wetlands is not only about the water body, it's about the surrounds, it's about how you treat the surrounds and how you reduce pollution and so on.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Considering the time, we can take one or two more questions. There's another one which has popped up in the chat box. Dr. Ganesh Gaikwad asks, how does the increasing water level in Lonar crater affect its surrounding ecosystem?
I have been to Lonar only once many years ago, so I really, I'm very sorry, Doc, I can't comment on this because I have not looked at it sort of serially. But I'm sure it makes a difference, and I really don't know what will happen. Well, I guess if the water level rises there, the salinity will decrease and you will get some effects. But it's a very, very typical and very unusual and very rare type of ecosystem. I would love to go back there and really do some work there, but I haven't had the opportunity to do that.
Thank you, sir. So there may not be any immediate questions right away.
Oh, but they can always communicate with me through you all, and I'll be very happy to.
Thank you so much. So I'm sure there'll be more questions emerging as they start visiting wetlands and being open to these questions that we have seen today, and they may want to come back to us. And there are a lot of messages of thank you and expressing their gratitude for this insightful session.
Oh, no, I thank the audience for being there, being patient with me about all these things. But yeah, it's much more fun if we talk to each other in person and have a live sort of session than through this little box that is in front of me.
Yes, sir, there has been a lot of interest around it, and we are considering in-person session, if possible, around these themes.
I would really say that's very
Thank
good.
you for the suggestion. So with this, yes, ma'am?
थांबूया का? तुम्ही सांगा.
Yeah, with this, we come to the conclusion of this session. We have with us Dr. Raymond, Head of Department of Environment Science at the SPPU. May I request him to share a few words about the webinar?
Okay, thank you and good evening. Am I audible, ma'am?
You're
Yes,
good,
yes,
you're
we
good.
can hear you well.
Good evening, Eric sir. And it's been a long time we met, and now I'm heading the environment department here. So my observations, I've been a keen listener of this webinar. Across the 3 days, we had talks on wetland and wetland conservation. The first talk was by Dr. Deepak Apte, and he spoke about the wetlands and how the airport probably is affecting flamingos in the Thane Creek. And of course, we heard then Hemant Karkan is talking about the Godrej sort of thing, and we've seen a lot of visuals in his presentation. And of course, closer to our heart, the Pashan Lake. It epitomizes the environmental history of Pune, actually, in terms of what you have been doing over there. So I always like the Ghosh Vakyas or things that you give us. One thing that is common for wetlands is change. And change is inevitable. I mean, I, being a geologist, understand that change is inevitable. But I like your talk regarding the terms like you said, fringe vegetation. I love that term because the transition zones in all of these ecosystems are very, very important. And the fringe vegetations in wetlands are very important. And the wetlands basically are constantly changing. And they are being affected by another keyword that you mentioned, siltation. And not a lot of studies have been done on siltations in wetland. And that is where we can hold hands in terms of all these institutions, understand what is the rate of siltation, understand what is the rate of eutrophication, and what are probably trace element biomagnifications that arise with this. I also liked what has come 3 days. In 3 days, all 3 speakers, distinguished speakers, have said about capacity building. And I think so this webinar is successful in doing that. Building capacities, not only of the people who listen over here, but Bharucha sir went on to say building capacities of teachers and students. And many of us are teachers out over here. And therefore, the capacity building related to wetlands will only happen not in this box that you call, that we sit in front of the box, but also by going to the and getting muddled and engrossed and making observations, like you rightly said, in the wetlands themselves. And therefore, I congratulate the organizers. I congratulate the distinguished speakers for spending their times. But I also extend a warm invitation and a proposal to actually have 1 day or 2 days. And I could hear that Bharucha sir has already extended invitations to his Shirur and other centers. And of course, sir, the Mulshi siltation remains, right?
Yes.
And I'm now over here, and we will connect through all of these organizations and start doing these siltation studies on these wetlands. And that will be another dimension that we can add. And as you rightly said, through the NEP endeavor, a lot of research projects and hand-holding in terms of on-job training and this thing. So this is a great opportunity, a great time that very senior personalities like you are available to us to guide us and hand over the baton to the next generation as and when it comes. And I like the optimism that you have shown amongst about our youngsters and the passion. And this, I think so this forum is very great forum to start getting things moving in the right direction. And I thank all of them for this great endeavor. But the organizers and myself will be very happy to conduct these tours actually, where actually it's a great thing to walk in the mud flat and the sand shoals, right? And to listen to the chirpings of these birds. It's a soul touching time, especially in the twilight zone, sir. In the mornings and evenings, yeah, those are the times that they are magical. And I think so humans need to experience all of that firsthand. And therefore, I request you to guide us in formulating such one-day tours, or even Lonar, for example. I've been working in Lonar, and of course, the question remained answered that the Lonar town water sewage comes out as a spring, and now it's building that delta. And as you rightly said, there is eutrophication and a change in the pH. So those 4 endemic species of algae are really under threat. So the other things are Myristica swarms, of course, freshwater along the Western Ghats. And so this is a forum. We have cross connections between geologists, geomorphologists, environmental biologists, and students here. And so I'm very happy to be a part of this family, and extend you greetings, and also leave with a note that if we can follow up this workshop with a bigger workshop, taking students to the field, it will be very, very beneficial. And I think so the passion of our great speakers here, Erach Bharucha sir, for example, that will very clearly translate into action on the field. So thank you very much, and hope to see you all soon, and have great interactions over here and also in the field. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Raymond sir, for bringing out those interesting moments that can happen only on field, and hope we have inspired our audience to take the next step and try and visit these wetlands. Over the last 3 days, we have been inviting our audience to share their name along with their favorite wetlands. So we have been having so many wetlands being represented along with all our people members. We also have so many wetlands who are part of this webinar, and I'm hoping that they all will inspire us as we move along ahead. I now hand over to Dr. Ajit Vartak to do the formal vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of INTACH Pune, Maharashtra Vruksha Samvardhini Pune, Vanarai Pune, Department of Environmental Sciences, Savitribai Phule Pune University, it is indeed a great honor and privilege for me to deliver the vote of thanks at the conclusion of this enriching 3-day lecture series on the wetlands, organized as part of our observance of World Water Week 2025. Over the past 3 days, we had the opportunity to delve into the ecological, environmental, and socio-economic importance of wetlands, those vital ecosystems that often go unnoticed but perform irreplaceable functions of our planet. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished speakers, Dr. Deepak Apte sir, Mr. Hemant Karkane sir, and Dr. Erach Bharucha sir, who generously shared their expertise, insights, and time. Your thought-provoking talks have not only broadened our understanding, but also inspired us to take meaningful action towards wetland conservation. All these lectures will be available on our YouTube channel, Mission Devrai. So please subscribe this channel. We have got more than 200 recorded lectures, which are more or less related with environmental subjects. On a special note, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Mr. and Mrs. Phatak and Supriya Madam for their support and assistance in organizing this event. No program can be successful without audience. In that regard, we have been extremely fortunate with the overwhelming response received. So thank you for your participation. With this, we conclude this evening's third and last lecture of World Water Week 2025. Once again, a big thanks to one and all until next year World Water Week event. I wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bye, sir. I hope it's a new beginning, and we will connect, and hopefully we will be in a position to to take this up at a different
And
phase.
sir has already
Thank you.
invited us to visit his Shirwal project. We must go and visit.
Yeah, they're all welcome.
Yes.
Absolutely, sir. That will be amazing. I mean,
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
thank you.
Can we stop the live